What is up, everyone? Welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and thank you for joining me for a very special episode of Countdown to Classic, as we're airing our very first ever in-depth interview. These hour-plus long interviews will now be aired every Wednesday on the show and will feature absolutely anyone who has something meaningful to say about World of Warcraft Classic. I'll be sitting down with a range of different voices, from the proverbial man-in-the-street players all the way to well-known community figures. My one guideline in selecting a guest is only that they have interesting, extended views on the game that they'd like to share with you, the worldwide audience of Countdown to Classic. Well, that, and I guess they need to be okay with being peppered with questions from me for an hour, because these are done purely in an interview style, question and answer. Now, some of you have asked exactly how these interviews will go down, and I can tell you that we spend the first 5 minutes going over the interviewee's resume, then about 50 minutes or so chatting, and then I let the interviewee rattle off their own personal anger management section, which regular listeners of the show will know is a bit of fun. And we then finish the interview with a segment called The Hot Seat, where I put about 8 fun hypothetical questions to the guest, and I really think you'll quite enjoy that segment. It really is a bit of fun. Anyway, this week I sat down with YouTuber and classic WoW personality Alexensual. And just before I play that amazing interview for you, I want to give you a short preamble that will apply to every interview you hear on this show. I do not know these people. There is no favoritism or grudges here on Countdown to Classic. This is the thinking man's or woman's podcast that presents all sides of an argument so that listeners can have all the information to make their own minds up about things. One week, you may enjoy an interview. Another week, you may not. The whole point is to get differing points of view out there into the ether. The vast majority of the interviews you'll hear on this show are the very first time I've actually had a voice conversation with the subject of the interview, which is why you'll usually hear it takes about 10 minutes to warm up as we feel each other out. None of the questions asked in these interviews have been pre-screened with the subject of the interview. Whilst I ask them for suggestions on what they'd like to discuss on the show, they are actually hearing the questions for the first time. So all answers and responses are genuine and in the moment. Finally, absolutely no favors or payments have been exchanged in return for an interviewee's appearance on this show, just in case anyone was thinking there were any shenanigans going on behind closed doors. Anyway, with that information out of the way, I proudly bring you the first of what is sure to be many weekly interviews on Countdown to Classic. Thanks everyone, and enjoy. All right, well, today on Countdown to Classic, we're sitting down with YouTuber and World of Warcraft Classic advocate, Alexensual. Alex, would that be a fair term to describe you?
I mean, I would consider myself a vanilla WoW fan. I started advocating for it really during Nostalrius, when Nostalrius launched. That was really when I started to realize that, maybe more people could be aware of this. So I started my YouTube channel because of that.
Well, I should say thanks very much for coming on the show, and thanks for agreeing to be here. You're definitely somewhat of a World of Warcraft identity these days, and someone I've been wanting to chat Warcraft with, so thanks again. But for those listeners who might not be fully aware of who you are, how about we go through your resume with World of Warcraft in a quick segment I call Resume in 5 Minutes, where I ask you 10 rapid-fire easy questions just about your WoW playing background. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Question number 1. With as much specificity as you're comfortable with, where in the world are you from?
Connecticut, United States.
Okay. And how long have you played World of Warcraft?
Let's see, 2004, so that was around 13 years now.
Okay. What was your original main character's name?
My very, very first one, an orc warrior named Azum, A-Z-U-M, but I ended up switching and making a rogue called Jackal, Jakk. or JACKYL, I think it was, 60 Undead Rogue.
What other classes outside of Rogue have you hit a level cap with?
Let's see. In Vanilla, I had a level 60 Undead Rogue, level 60 Undead Warlock, and I didn't hit level cap with a Shaman, but I got to around level 57 as a Shaman. Towards like Burning Crusade, and that was a different ball game. I mean, Burning Crusade, it was a little easier, though, to level because they did a lot of changes throughout the expansion with leveling.
And which server did you play on?
The Rogue was on Spirestone, which I believe was the one of the original servers, and the Warlock was on Anderhall, which was one of the fresh servers that was in 2005.
And do you gravitate towards PvP or PvE servers?
For the most part, PvP. I would say around 95% of the time I've been playing World of Warcraft, it was on a PvP server. There were instances, though, where I did roll on PvE. I rolled on PvE server during Nostalrius because during Nostalrius, the population was really high during the PvP server. And in that time frame, it was just a lot of lag, a lot of issues with the game from the servers, so we switched to PvE, a bunch of us, and we played on PvE there. And I also played on a PvE server in Burning Crusade, which is where I got most of my raiding done in Sunwell and Black Temple. Okay,
well, you just mentioned raiding. What is your highest raid experience?
For the highest ever was during Burning Crusade. I got to Felmist and Sunwell. I didn't kill Felmist, but we had a lot of wipes and a lot of progression on it. But I believe the guild disbanded at that time.
Sure. Did you raid much in vanilla?
No, I was much younger. I was around like 13, 14 years old. So I played the game. I pretty much played the entire game, except, for raiding. I mean, I did raid a little bit. I did raid like ZG, AQ20, Molten Core, some of BWL, but I wasn't, I was much younger at the time. I didn't really have the time to get involved with AQ and Nax, especially back then. It's a whole different ball game back then compared to today, too.
Are you currently playing World of Warcraft, and where?
Of course.
Yeah.
No, I'm not playing retail WoW. I mean, the last time I played retail World of Warcraft was about 2 months into Legion's life cycle. Mm-hmm. And right now I play on my Dwarf Priest on Light's Hope's Lightbringer server, where I'm in the Guild of Grizzly, which is a known veteran private server guild, and we're raiding, I think last night we raided AQ40, cleared it, BWL, Molten Core, and right now we're prepping to do Nax Rammus, so it should be pretty fun.
Sure. No, sorry, I know it seems like a silly question, but some people I bump into do say, actually, I'm on a hiatus until Classic comes. Now, finally, do you have a quick plug for any YouTube channels, or obviously you're a YouTuber, or any other content that you've got coming, or anything that you do?
I don't want to, plug anything on your show.
It's totally fine.
Is that okay? Or?
Well, it's totally fine, but you got a podcast coming or something?
Yeah, we are having a podcast coming on Friday. It's going to be called Baron's Chat. It'll be the very first episode of the podcast on this Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern time on my channel. And it'll have two co-hosts with me. It'll be Lavos, and who's a new upcoming streamer, but he's been playing on private servers for a long time. And you have Marky Mark, who used to make vanilla WoW guides. He kind of stopped making the guides, but he's been playing on private servers. I've played on private servers with Mark for, I'd say, over the last year or two. So it's really, really exciting. And we're also all in the same guilds in Grizzly. We all raid together. We're going to be progressing through Nax together, and we're going to be doing a podcast. So it's going to be really, really fun, interesting. And I think it's just an angle that is just not currently out there right now. It's just a different perspective, really, of the scene.
Sure, I appreciate the humility and you're being polite, but I'll do it for you. If listeners want to find you, obviously you are on YouTube at the channel Alexensual. So if you want to hear some of Alex's or see some of Alex's videos, please feel free to look him up there. Now, one last question, just while we get to know you, Alex. Complete this sentence so we know where your allegiances lie. For the
Horde, dude.
There you go. All right. Too easy.
For the Horde, man. Like, what's funny about that is a lot of content creators are actually Alliance. I'd actually say a vast majority of them are Alliance. And I'm glad that that we have some content creators now that are on the Horde side. For the most part, it's always usually been Alliance, but I'm Horde. I've been Horde since. There's been times where I've been Alliance, but about 95% of the time I've been Horde. So.
Yeah, I have noticed and found it like odd just in a numbers game that you're exactly right. A lot of the content creators I do come across do seem to be Alliance, and just in the basically balancing of numbers things, you think it would kind of even out. But I mean, I was Alliance back in the day. I'm rolling Horde going forward as much as I can because I want to see the other side of the game. But yeah, I have picked up on that for sure. Now, just to let listeners know, I literally just approached you yesterday basically by email, and you agreed to come on the show. And when I asked what particular areas of World of Warcraft you'd like to chat about, or what you might consider a certain, field of expertise, if you will, on your end, you told me that changes implemented to the game in a sort of post-vanilla and post-Burning Crusade world is something that you're quite passionate about. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't want to see any changes to, obviously there's going to be some discussion that we have to address because there's a lot of things during vanilla. It was a lengthy period of time that a lot of people, don't fully grasp of the fact that there was a lot of class reviews. There was a lot of discussion being done throughout those 2 years because that was the origins of the game, and it needed, it wasn't a perfect game, but it worked at the time. And there was a lot of people on the forums everywhere just talking about discussions of the game, which is kind of funny because we're doing that right now. But the way I see it is we're trying to replicate a version of the game that we no longer can play. I can go on Project 64 or an emulator for Nintendo 64 and play Legend of Zelda, or I can play a Super Nintendo emulator and play Super Mario. But I can't do that with Vanilla WoW. And I think that's part of the animosity towards the people who suggest changes to the game is that, it's not necessarily we disagree with those changes. There's some things that people say that I completely agree with. So, for example, do I like the honor system in Vanilla WoW? Of course not. I absolutely hate it. I think it's terrible. I think it's not really skill-based. I think Burning Crusade arena system was much better. But I wouldn't change it because, I want to respect the fact that we're trying to emulate something that we cannot play before.
Now, when you say that we can't really emulate it in that way in today, are you saying that the private server scenario isn't quite close enough for you? You're waiting on that official release?
There's a lot. Private servers, people would be surprised, have drastically improved over the years. Since Nostalria specifically, there's been such a huge movement towards Blizz-like. They call it Blizz-like. So there were servers back in the day, private servers, where they would try to emulate it, but not that much, probably more like 50-50. You'd have a lot of vendors out there selling gear, a lot of vendors where you could just loot, the Tiger Mount from Zul'Gurub or Thunder Fury off a vendor. But now it's getting to the point where you can actually get the chance to relive the game. Now, is it exactly how it was? No. I would say it's getting there. I would say it's at least 75% of the way there, but there's things there on these private servers that they cannot get right, like a Blizz-like server. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely useless to play on there either, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, you've mentioned that you've got quite a bit of experience with private servers, and private servers is something that I've touched on in the show recently when I told listeners about my experience just last week with the opening of K3. And how many private servers have you played on? And if listeners don't really understand, what's your background? And because that's sort of how you came to the forefront of the communities through your involvement in the private servers, isn't that right?
Well, there's been people who've played private servers way longer than I have. There was servers back then called Scriptcraft. That was generally one example of a server I didn't play from years and years and years ago, from around 2011 to 2012, which I believe was right around Cataclysm. That was one of the very first big, Blizz-like vanilla servers or attempting to reach it, And since then, I didn't play on those servers, but I started with Nostalrius almost 3 years ago. And ever since then, I've played on Nostalrius, which was a vanilla private server. After Nostalrius shut down, a lot of us got hyped for a server based on Burning Crusade called Play TBC. And that server was really hyped and had a lot of viewers. I think it was on streams for it had 10, 15,000 viewers. It was there was like thousands of accounts ready to play this server. It was one of the most hyped servers, but it was a complete flop, right? So then a lot of people tried more Burning Crusade servers came out, like Hellfire and Vengeance of Azeroth and all these other servers that we tried. And then eventually Elysium came out, but Elysium, it was a different Elysium. It was originally called Valkyrie WoW, which I did not play. Valkyrie WoW turned into Elysium, right? This was like the Krog and Shenna, the origins of that. So that server came out first. And then Nostarius decided to come back, and they wanted to give the code and work with Elysium, which was Shenna. Shenna controlled Elysium. This was Elysium 1 that a lot of people they sometimes forget about.
Yep.
But Elysium then shut down that server and started making the real Elysium based on the Nostarius core and their staff. And that became a bigger thing. And then we delved into the drama with the gold selling, all of that stuff. And that server had to shut down, or that server didn't shut down, but most everybody left to go to Light's Hope because the people on Elysium that didn't agree with it, they went to Light's Hope and they took the core, and then we played on that server. And in the meantime, we played on Gummy's Felmus server, which is a Burning Crusade server, which had a massive amounts of hype. I also tried Chronos 2. I can go on and on about it. There's just so many servers at this point where
I totally understand.
There could be a server that comes out next month. Who knows?
Absolutely, and I don't doubt, having heard that you've got plenty of private server experience. But you mentioned it a few times. Obviously, the Elysium drama, and you were somewhat involved in that. I guess one way to term it would be, some people felt that you were sort of responsibly reporting on what was happening with that. What's in hindsight? What's your memory and retrospect of that event?
I've always been the kind of person where I always thought private servers were a gray area. I think it's okay to play on them, but the problem I have personally is I don't like it when people try to, because they're replicating it for the players. This is supposed to be for the players. So when I see a server that's attempting to sabotage that and ruin that experience for thousands of people, and I'm in a position of power as a YouTuber, a little bit, to a degree, not a lot, but to a degree, and I'm on their server and I see that they're, ripping off Blizzard's IP, World of Warcraft, with real life, making money off of it when it should be about the players. Turns me off. It turns me off, and there's been many servers like that, and I just don't think it's okay. I think it's fucked up. I don't think it's going too far, and I saw that, and I have no regrets, really. I mean, were some of the motives a little far? Maybe. I mean, there was periods of time where maybe I could have taken back some of the wording about some things I said about the players that didn't believe the drama at the time, but most of the people looking back at it would probably say, it was a good thing that we no longer play on that server because of all the things that they were doing.
Looking back on your experience with that incident and seeing things now, like new servers opening up, obviously you got Kronos running multiple servers now. And as I said, I checked that one out over the weekend, and I was intrigued by something that I noticed with Kronos, where they said that they were effectively just running on a tip jar basis. They were taking gracious donations only. They weren't having anything to do with money outside of that. When you hear things like that, what kind of effect does that have on your spidey sense?
The problem with Kronos is that they've had a long history, and a lot of people new to the scene, like, they don't really... There's a lot of stuff that's happened that they don't understand. So, like, for example, with Kronos, and Kronos originally, Kronos 1, it came out relatively close to Nostarius, and there was a lot of drama and a lot of competition to see which would be the better server. And at the time, Nostarius won in the end with the population, and Kronos kind of got and slithered away. But then Kronos 2 came out right after Nostarius was shut down, I believe. And a lot of people started playing there, myself included. And it just, for the most part, it just seems people tend to, I don't know, Kronos has a fan base, but from what I've seen, a lot of people aren't really happy with a lot of the things, like how they run the server. They have had things in the past where they've had cash shops with, selling and buying characters, selling and buying mounts, just all this different stuff. And then there's, the population too, there's just some questionable things, but there's questionable things on all servers. Like, White's Hope even has question marks. So,
well, I think you've mentioned that one or alluded to it recently on Twitter, I believe. What are some of your issues with White's Hope?
I want to like White's Hope. I do like the server, but the problem is a lot of the people that used to work on Mysterious that did work on White's Hope have slowly just faded away. And my question is, why? Why are all these people that once worked with them being shunned from that server? And I don't really understand it. Now, there's some still there, I would imagine. But for the most part, a lot of the familiar faces that the private server players are used to, good and bad, are no longer there. It could be because they don't like what's going on. It could be because, they're just not a fan of the server anymore, or they're not a fan of doing what they were doing the past few years. And also at the other side of the coin, for all we know, White's Hope could be totally fine, uncorruptible, everything's fine. But, the main concern about White's Hope, obviously, is the fact that they did have some drama. They did have a staff member selling a legendary binding under the table for real life money. Now, could that have just been a rogue staff member? Could have been involved with the entire staff. I mean, that's a bit much. I would imagine that the entire staff wouldn't be involved. I would imagine that at least one person would have been upset. But you never know.
When you talk about actions like that, who are you in like, do you speak to a lot of the people involved behind the scenes in the private servers? Where do you get this info from?
Yes. I've talked to White Kidney is he's one of the main people behind, that's his username, White Kidney. Mm-hmm. He's one of the bigger names behind the scenes when it comes to like private servers and specifically White's Hope. And he was the one who really not really led the charge, but he was involved with, leaving Elysium with a lot of the staff during the drama to form White's Hope. Mm-hmm. For the most part, a lot of people like White's Hope because it is, at least in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, and probably I would say, including the people, Lavos and Marky Mark, that I'm going to do the podcast with, they all agree that White's Hope is likely the superior server.
Okay. I don't want to go too far into it because I appreciate that they're not here to kind of offer their own opinion, but you just mentioned White Kidney. Now, just in my brief research in what happened with Elysium, was White Kidney not somewhat involved in kind of the good and the bad side of it?
White Kidney, in my opinion, and a lot of other people probably think the same way, is he's just a huge question mark. It could go either way, and there have been times where I've talked to him and I would have high hopes that he's doing the right thing and they're not, doing anything shady over there on White's Hope. Mm-hmm. On the other side of the coin, I mean, there are some questionable things that people do bring up that could have, some validity to it. Who knows?
But if I presume you obviously speak to many people in the scene, but if some of them, what do you do in order to, I guess, double check or ensure that the information you're receiving is reliable in terms of if you're receiving it from people who you feel might be sort of question mark kind of people? What do you do to ensure that these things are happening to make you sort of judge a certain private server?
Honestly, research and just, one thing that I always liked doing about, how I run things on my channel and how I do things on the servers is that I like interacting with the community. Whether good or bad, I heavily enjoy that social experience. So I've had people come to me with information, about a server or this person, and then I will investigate personally. I will look as much as I can. There were instances, plenty of people, sending me evidence. Like I remember, I'll give you one example. There was a guy who sent me a semi folder of information regarding buying and unbanned. So he was banned from the server, and he was talking to a gold seller that said, "Okay, we have a guy on White's Hope staff. We'll unban your account for you for this amount of money." But there was just never really any solid proof. But it looked legit, and we verified that the conversation did happen, but there was no proof that he could actually go through with it. but that's a breadcrumb that could lead to something else, and that's what I enjoy doing personally, is when that regard with that stuff is, there always needs to be some kind of breadcrumb, I feel, that could lead to something else, that could lead, tracks in the woods from a bear, follow those tracks and eventually you'll find the bear, that's the kind of thing that I've always really enjoyed doing on the channel.
Now, knowing all that you know about these private servers and sort of being aware of these semi-cloak and dagger things that might happen behind the scenes, if you started a private server, the Alexensual private server, what would that private server be like and how would it be run?
If I had to run a server, it would be 1 to 60 vanilla, times 1 experience, patch to patch, so patch 1.1 to patch 1.2 as much as possible. We could talk about class talents, but I would probably either choose between maybe the original talents for a period of time and then over time switching to patch, a different patch with the major talent design. It really depends. I mean, there's a lot of questions that even Blizzard has to answer when it comes to the talents. Do they want to do patch, the later talents or the talents from early on? Because there was 2 phases of talents and then there was massive amounts of class changes. They might end up just going with, the final version of the classes. I mean, is that a deal breaker to me? No, it wouldn't be a deal breaker because that's how we see it on private servers. I might as well play a Blizzard server, that looks identical to Light's Hope, right? I mean, if I'm paying $15 and I'm getting all that, but I would do patch 1.1 to patch 1.12. I would have no battlegrounds at launch, just like how it was, no ranking system, and I would introduce that at the right time. And I would just make it as Blizz-like as humanly possible with no changes.
Okay. Now that we've sort of obviously got quite a bit of detail on your thoughts on private servers, what are I think it's obvious what your hopes are for Classic, but in saying that preference that you just talked about, the patch progression from 1.1 all the way through to 1.12 over time,
right, is
that something that you, A, hope for in Classic, and B, think we'll actually get?
I expect that in Classic. I 100% expect that. Now there can be discussions on whether or not we can have certain things be patch content, right? There's we can easily, Blizzard can easily do patch 1.1 and then go to patch 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, over that 2-year period of time. But if you go in the patch notes, you see the massive amounts of changes, the massive amounts of class balancing, massive amounts of bug fixes. But when I say patch 1.1 to patch 1.12, I don't fully expect them to release these patches with the bugs, the exploits, the class changes. What I expect to see is the other things that were involved in the patches, like Dire Maul. I want Dire Maul at patch 1.3, how it was, or the PvP honor system. I want that at patch 1.4. Battlegrounds, I want at patch 1.5. Those major concepts to a game should not be at launch. Those should be, as the game develops. It's kind of like Burning Crusade. And Burning Crusade, during the final patch, they removed the attunements for Tier 5. Should that be at launch if we go to Burning Crusade Classic? I don't think so. During Wrath of the Lich King, you have LFD at patch 3.3.5, which is around the last patch. Should that be at launch with Naxxramas? I mean, I would assume most people would say no. So why would that be any different from my standpoint in vanilla WoW? I mean, you have those kind of mechanics in future expansions that are at later patches. Should we have everything at start? I mean, and I'm not even talking about the raids. I'm talking about the game design, The game design, in my opinion, should be, give people the content. It doesn't need the raids, yeah, but, certain things, so maybe it's good to experiment without them for a bit. And then when time comes, when Battlegrounds come into play in patch 1.5, 6 months down the road, then we can introduce Battlegrounds. Mm-hmm.
Well, you just mentioned bug fixes, and obviously, if people know you, you are famously no changes to a rather high degree. I think it would be fair to say. Right. Now, bug fixes. You sound like you're actually okay with that? Obviously, is that something? Is that a change to you?
No, no. For I've said this on stream a bit, but the changes stuff, I am no changes, But I always expected that we would be getting Battle.net. I always assumed we'd be getting Battle.net because that just makes sense. I mean, why would Blizzard Entertainment, this huge company, this huge business, not put Classic WoW on one of their main video game hubs? It just doesn't make sense to me from a business standpoint why they wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. I fully expect them to do that. Now, would I vote in favor for Battle.net? No, absolutely not. I would not want Battle.net in the game. However, I expect it. You know, I'm at times unreasonable, but there are times where I am reasonable, and I fully expect to see Battle.net in at least, I don't know, inside the game, but I expect Classic to be on Battle.net. Now, when it comes to bug fixes, it really depends on what it is. I think there's a big difference. I mean, like, let's say, for example, you take the ZG Plague incident, right? Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big that was a pretty big event that happened in vanilla for a short period of time. However, you know, how comparable is that to a bug that a class can abuse and gain massive amounts of gold or currency, or break records on a meter or a boss fight, make the boss fight easier? I think those are two completely different scenarios, and thankfully I don't have to make that decision because I don't get paid the money to do it.
Well, you just used the word reasonable, and you suggest that obviously you're of the mind that you're somewhat reasonable in your thinking when it comes to what Blizzard might deliver with Classic, and obviously bug fixes is something you sound like you would be more than okay with.
Bug fixes, yes. I mean, if they didn't do it though, I mean, I would totally be fine with it. If I had to play vanilla again and have the loot bug where I'm sitting looting the mob and I can't loot the mob, totally fine. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything beyond that? Any kind of modes or, you know, not necessarily game-breaking things that they could do that you might be as reasonable with coming in, or not so much?
I could see colorblind mode, but I'm completely against graphics. Any updated graphics, I'm 100% against.
And what are your thoughts on the option to toggle graphics if that were available?
100% against.
Okay.
I would be completely against it.
And in saying that, the only reason I asked this one is it's a topic that I covered off on a few weeks ago on the show, and this is something that did seem to get people quite passionate about. And one, I mean, to be honest, I personally would be surprised if we got a toggle. I think they're just going to pick something and go with it. But in the hypothetical situation that they introduced a toggle, tell me, what is it about the toggle and that irks you so much and obviously this is a question that people come up against a lot if they're against the toggle. If, you know, hypothetically it doesn't change the way that you experience your game only in other players, why are you against it?
Well, I think Aspen Gold made a great point the other day. I think he was on some podcast or something, but he made a great point about if they did do updated models, how is that going to look in a world that isn't updated? You know, like, what are you going to have? Updated character models with the crappy Molten Court looking gear? That just isn't going to work. It's not going to look good. If they change the updated models or the graphics, they're going to have to redo the entire game for the toggle. And I'm not really a technical guy, but if they have that toggle there, I mean, let's say they just say put the toggle and you press yes. I mean, does that just mean your entire client just changes? Is that going to cause any issues? I have no idea personally, but I just don't see it happening. I would still play if they added a toggle, but I wouldn't be happy with it. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's important to market Classic WoW in the best possible scenario as the way it looked, because I think that is the willpower and the nostalgia factor that people often talk about. You know, when you look at Leroy Jenkins or you look at any illegal Danish, there's that special factor. Even like, you know, you watch an old video and the video has, you know, it's poor quality, whatever, like a video, I don't know, like just the World of Warcraft that you play, or Big Blue Dress, or Jimmy World of Warcraft story. All those videos don't really have HD, you know, options, or they look older, and it has that nostalgia factor that people miss. And I think that are the graphics mind blowing? No, but I think they should stay the same.
Sure.
For that nostalgia factor and that, you know, that factor alone of knowing you're playing vanilla WoW, knowing, you know, it's kind of, I'm thinking the right word here, that the immersion factor too. Like, you want to be immersed in the world. You can't really be immersed if you're looking at models, even if it's toggle. Like, what if you're watching a stream? there's just so many arguments against it. It's just, well, what if you're watching streams too, or YouTubes, and it's vanilla WoW, and you're watching it and it's different graphics than the ones you're used to? That might turn you off too.
Just one last question on this before we change tact a little bit. But hypothetically speaking, let's go, Alex, gun to your head, life or death situation. Someone's broken into your house. They've said, that's it, Alex, you have to pick one change to vanilla, and pick that change and I'll leave you alone. Otherwise, sorry, bud, it's all over. Which one? And no one would begrudge you because it's a life or death situation.
Okay.
Which
it's
one
a
would
life
you
or death
choose?
situation. I have to pick one.
Yep.
Or my life's over.
Mm-hmm.
I would remove dishonorable kills.
Okay. It sounds like that's something that really bothers you.
Yes, I hate dishonorable kills. I think it's one of the worst additions they've ever made in World of Warcraft.
Okay. Now, I just want to shift gears a little bit, and move more down to your content creation, the side of things that you do. By way of what you do with YouTube and everything that you've done over the years, do you think it's fair to say that you're somewhat of a polarizing figure in the classic community?
What do you mean by polarizing?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you receive or read, or do you tune in at all to what people say about you online, or you just tune it out?
Oh, oh, yeah. I'm well aware that people don't like me, but I think they have the right to do that. I think they have the right to, and that's the other thing too is, it's funny because a lot of people, they talk badly about the channel or badly about me in an instance, or if they might, first of all, that happens to everybody. Everybody gets haters. Second of all, I think it's fair game. Absolutely. I mean, it depends on where you're having the discussion, but like, for example, you don't go to somebody's house and tell them, you don't go to somebody's house and insult them. That's just not how I would do things. I mean, that's how I lived my entire life. I mean, I don't go into somebody's house and say, wow, your house is garbage. That's for a different place at a different time.
Right.
And so I think anybody can talk badly about anybody, or not just badly, but have an opinion. I think everybody's have the right to an opinion, even if it's Alexensual, even if it's Tally or Kunkin or Asmongold or anybody really. I'm not comparing myself to those people, but those are just examples of content creators, of known famous ones. And I think it's completely fair game. I mean, the best example I can give is in real life. I mean, there's people that have jobs that do things differently. There's different people, I know you said that you're a lawyer. I mean, there's different lawyers that do different things. There's different television anchors that have different opinions. There's different sports analysts. There's different analysts for everything in life. I mean, the chances of you agreeing with every single person is just never going to happen. You're going to have your favorite content creators. You're going to have your favorite analysts that talk about games or video games or sports. A content creator on YouTube, like, you're going to subscribe to the people you like. And I think that's completely fair game to have an opinion about somebody else, whether, I just think it's personally just completely fair game because it happens in real life on a daily basis.
You just said something that, to be honest, I hadn't quite considered yet and is starting to make a lot of sense to me, in that when you say you don't come into someone's house and effectively talk shit about them. Now, you've been known to run somewhat of a tight ship, is it fair to say, with your community? Is that the ethos that you hold behind why you do things the way you do?
I'm trying, hopefully, to set a precedent, because my advice to content creators is something that you have to be aware of, is that there is a section of a lot of people call me toxic, or they call me, or they say that I'm bad for the community. But when they actually play the game and they see the section of players that I've seen, they will quickly change their tune and realize that what I've been doing is the right thing the entire time, because you want to avoid what I like to call the Ice Poseidon situation. Ice Poseidon, known streamer, had a very, very toxic community. That it wasn't his fault or anything. I think it was mostly due to the fact that he just didn't monitor his community, and people were entering your community. Like in real life, the way I see it, you have rules. This isn't anarchy. This is, you go to any country in the world, there's a set of rules you have to abide by. You can't just go up to people and just constantly insult them and punch them in the face. You go to jail for that, right? And that's the way I see it. I think that's a lot of the big problems with streamers these days is, free speech, one thing, but, if you want to battle that toxicity, that's up to the streamer too. I mean, do you allow your community to, be rampant and, toxic, or do you kind of simmer the pot a little bit? And that's what I've been doing on my channel. Our community is fantastic. It's been really good. We even have a Blizzard employee in our Discord now, and we've reached out, and everything's going really well. And I'm really looking forward to the future in that regard.
Well, you just mentioned your community, and I wanted to touch on that. How, obviously, you've developed, and you've been lucky enough to develop over the years what I would term quite a relatively large fan base. How would you describe your fans?
Well, it depends. There's a lot of people that watch me that are fans that, for the most part, I wouldn't consider them World of Warcraft fans. I would consider them MMO fans. I think it's mostly, and that's what I like about my channel, is that it doesn't seem like we're stuck in one game. I feel like with my audience, I could easily move to a different MMO, and things for the most part will hold up. And I think that's a mistake other content creators make, is they kind of just adapt to one game and they're kind of afraid to branch out. But that's our fault as a content creator. You're responsible, in my opinion, building what you need to build. And a lot of, everybody makes mistakes, Alexensual included, but, you just have to be aware of the direction of your channel and see what kind of community you want, But my community, for the most part, very MMO centric. They don't trust Blizzard Entertainment for the most part. I would say a vast majority of them don't. They would like to rebuild that, though. Like that, it doesn't mean that bridge of trust can't ever be repaired. We would love to repair that bridge of trust. It's just,
Sure.
A lot of us are WoW veterans, and we've seen the direction of the game, and it's going downhill. And a lot of people from my audience don't play retail WoW because they don't like the direction of the game, and that's fine. I don't think there's any reason for people to hate on a community that doesn't like your current game. I think that's, it's kind of silly. I mean, don't worry about it. Yeah.
You mentioned that word toxic before, and I know it might be hard to say, sort of putting you in a position of perhaps putting words into the mouths of other people, but why is it that you think people have come to the point where they've labeled you toxic?
I think they're so used. Me personally, I view retail WoW and classic WoW communities completely different. Classic WoW community, the vanilla WoW community, from what I've seen, is a lot more, not conservative in a political sense, but more traditional, more traditionalist. They're afraid of change. They don't want to, try to progress into a different version of the game. It's something I've realized. And the retail audience is always looking for change, always looking to progress into new areas. And I think those two kind of communities just cannot coexist. And sure, in a perfect world peace, everybody gets along, everybody's, at the dinner table together, but just don't see it happening in this scenario.
Well, in touching in the difference between obviously the retail and the classic communities, I think I've read that you've mentioned before that you also feel that there's a great disparity between the sort of generic classic community and the private server players. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the true community, in my opinion, I think is just waiting. I think they're just waiting, and they kind of just stopped reading everything. I mean, the private server community, that's really long discussion. So many of them, also like other expansions. It's not just vanilla WoW, but vanilla WoW reigns supreme because that's the most popular era of WoW at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people on private servers that like Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King or even Cataclysm and onward. They even have World of Warcraft Legion private servers, right? Or even Mists of Pandaria.
Right.
But so that's tough. But all right, what was the question again? Sorry.
I was saying that's all right. No, so I've read that you've mentioned before that you feel there's a difference even between the classic community and the private community. And how do you feel that that's going to work when they effectively come together on the release of classic?
Oh, it won't. I think what's going to happen is I think it's going to be segregated. I think private server players will tend to go to their own servers, and I think the retail players will go to their own servers, and I think they will all go together. Now, there's going to be some mixing and matching. There's going to probably be some, melting pot situations, but on certain servers. But I think for the most part, from what I've seen, it's still a long time away, but I think for the most part, I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if there was a few servers not designated for it, but known as, the private servers.
And given that some of those servers might turn into melting pots, what would be your thoughts if you wound up in one of those melting pots?
If I was a new player, I would be concerned. If I was a new player, I probably wouldn't go on those servers because they're fully expecting you to play, to be knowledgeable of the game. Now, it could be wrong. People might have a different opinion on launch. I mean, there's a lot of things on private servers that are different than on live classic servers that we'll have to see. I mean, we'll have to see how it looks.
Is that an expectation?
For all we know, private server players for the first time on Classic might feel like a different game because they're so used to playing the end game patch.
Is that an expectation that you would have of the players on your server, that it's sort of a shape up or ship out feeling from you?
Well, personally, me, I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. I've had offers to join certain guilds. I've had, people tell me, "Oh, what server are you going to play on? You're going to play with us on this server." It's like, I don't really know which server I want to play on. I do for sure, though. I do know I want to avoid any server that has a vast amount of streamers on it, because I feel like that experience is going to be extremely poor due to the fact that you're going to have massive amounts of people playing, not because of the game, but because of the streamer.
Mm.
So I think in that category, I personally would avoid that kind of server at all costs.
What are your views on one of the prevailing theories about how Classic may come across is that it may be populated by these, and I'm not sure whether you term yourself as one of these kinds of people, but these quote unquote elitists. What do you feel about the mixing of, I guess I would say, do you think it's unfair if someone were to call you, like, oh, Alexensual is an elitist? Do you think that's fair or unfair? And then flowing on from that, what do you think about elitists, being mixed with new players? Let's say there was someone who'd never played World of Warcraft before and then got thrown into your server. What would you think about that?
Okay, so there's different kinds of elitism from what I've seen. You have your players at the very top of the totem pole that are really elitist. But that happens in every video game. Like every single video game I've ever played in my entire life that's multiplayer has those elitist players. I mean, Jesus, I remember Halo 2. The people that were the level cap at multiplayer was level 50. The elitism from that category of people was mind-blowing. Like I've never seen something in my life as toxic as that was back in the day during Halo 2. Just because I remember back then I was right around that area, and I just remember playing with people, and it was just so toxic. It was so bad. And then on private servers, you have these instances of people. It depends too, because there's different. It's how you play. There's certain people that are casual. There's certain people that are hardcore or semi-hardcore. It really depends on, how you want to take the game. I do think there's a lot of elitism, though. A lot of it is it that bad? I mean, you have to understand that it's a game that came out so long ago. I mean, I'm not really surprised at this point that people have mastered the game and are somewhat elitist. I think it's going to be like that on Classic for sure. I do think that there's going to be elitism, but I like everything out in the world. Like I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if there's ninja looters. I'm not going to be surprised if anything really, because we're repeating history. I mean, there was elitism back in the day too, all the time. I mean, elitism's in all video games. But for me personally, would I consider myself an elitist? I mean, at times, yeah, I would. I mean, it depends on the situation, though. I mean, it's more of the fact of just trying to. I mean, if I say, for example, rep paladins are useless and you shouldn't be a rep paladin in vanilla WoW, it's not necessarily because I want to be elitist. It's because I'm spreading information at the same time. I mean, if you want to be a rep paladin in vanilla WoW, I think it's fair game and you should do what you want. At the other side of the coin, though, you shouldn't be surprised if you never get into a good raiding guild.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at private servers right now, I mean, I can tell you right now, the top guilds, especially in AQ right now, for the most part, 90% of them do not take any of those specs. They don't take rep paladins, nothing. It's not because they can't. It's because why bother? There's no reason to, because you're actually, limiting the potential of that raid group.
Now, just one thing you mentioned, and as I mentioned, without wanting to turn this into a mudslinging match at all, when you say that's your feelings on Ret Paladins, and believe me, I know nothing of Ret Paladins, but because I played a rogue back in the day. But is that perhaps a thinly veiled commentary on a certain content creator, or is that your genuine thoughts?
Oh,
on the class?
no. I mean, Ret Paladins. I've always hated Ret Paladins, to be honest.
Okay.
It's not just Ret Paladins. It's, it's all the other specs like the Boomkins and the Elemental Shamans. And it's not that I hate people that play those specs. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think they should just play it during Burning Crusade. I mean, Burning Crusade's a great expansion for that. And I fully imagine we are going to go to Burning Crusade. And Burning Crusade, it's better than vanilla in a lot of reasons, a lot of ways. Vanilla is better in a lot of ways. But for Ret Paladins and those kind of people specifically, it's not because I specifically hate them. It's because of my experience on the game that has made me hate them. If you played vanilla or you played back in the day and you remember the forums and the people complaining nonstop, begging for changes, it was mostly the paladins, the specs, that were not meant to DPS, that, were trying to change the game on their own. And when that was not Blizzard's intention. Because at the time they did have a hybrid tax. They did talk about, the fact that, Paladin's supposed to be healing. They've had video clips on it. Now they did tinker with it a little bit, but I think it was mostly considered a side project at the time to tank as a Paladin or a BDPS, not your main role. Each class had a main role, and that was what you were strongest at. So going back at it, it's not because I hate Ret Paladins, just because I hate them. But I just always felt like they were one of the classes that always complained and wanted changes to the game.
You mentioned earlier that you had a Blizzard employee now in your Discord channel, and I just wanted to touch on, is it right that you put a video up? I thought I watched a video of yours relatively recently where you spoke about perhaps having now an open line of communication with Blizzard. Is that what you were referring to?
Somewhat. I don't really have an open line of communication. I do have, someone at Blizzard. I mean, having I do talk to Ornix sometimes. He is the head community manager. That's a pretty important detail. That's a pretty important factor, and just the fact that, when I talk to Ornix, and we've had history now, like we've, the community manager drama and just going back and forth a little bit, and the takedowns of my channel. It's really interesting to see how you could come together with someone like that and try to show to the community that, things can be better in a better direction when it comes to that with Blizzard. With Blizzard, I think that's important.
With this avenue to be able to perhaps speak to Blizzard either through Ornix or through what other avenues you may have, what's your aim there? What kind of thoughts are you trying to get across to them?
Nothing really. I mean, I sent them a rather large document of my opinions and experience, but it was it's mostly just, I would say more of a pro of communication. It's not like I'm really looking to do anything. It's more of just the fact that, I like having that open line of communication so there won't be any any problems in the future down the road.
Do you feel that your opinion is something that Blizzard would be seeking?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I know they've watched the videos before. Do I know if they're a frequent watcher? I have no idea, but I do know, based on what I've seen from text conversations, that they do. Yes, in fact, do. Now, how many employees? I don't know, but I know at least one or two employees that have watched. Now, what's my goal with that? I mean, nah. I mean, I'm not really looking for, if they listen, they listen. If I would hope they would listen, though. I mean, let's be honest here. The fact of the matter is they've lost a lot of content creators that used to comment on the game and were vanilla fans. The era before Cataclysm, they have lost a lot of those people. Like if you look back and look at the content creators before Cataclysm compared to post Cataclysm, most of them are gone. They cover other games. I'm in a position where, and maybe Blizzard realizes this, I don't know, is that I am a figurehead that isn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But, there are other games in development right now that easily could give Blizzard competition. There are, back in the day, there was WoW, funny meme about it, WoW killers, right? That never really killed WoW.
Right.
But there are new games coming out, that are in development. Do they want to lose more content creators to those games? I mean, that's up to Blizzard. I would want to stay and talk about the game, but it really depends on them in the direction of Classic. But I in that regard too, which is why I would hope and be surprised that they change the game, because I really don't think that they want to further, destroy that really rusted bond of trust right now.
Well, you mentioned those other games. Do you plan to check out games like Crowfall and Ashes of Creation and things like that?
Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, yes. I've already submitted, I pledged to them. And then Pantheon is a game that is being developed by people who used to make EverQuest, including Brad McQuaid. So I have names behind it. They're crowdfunding it, I believe. I mean, it's not being run by a company. I think it has a huge potential. Mm-hmm. Now, I've never really pledged to anything like that before, but this is the first one. We'll see if it holds up or not. But I'm very much looking forward to that game. If I had to guess right now, based on what I know, that game alone I'm more excited for than any other MMO in development right now.
Now, you mentioned the changing landscape of the content creation community pre and post Kata. What are your thoughts on the situation with the current World of Warcraft content creation community, perhaps focusing on YouTube?
Or do you want retail ones?
Either or, both classic and retail.
Okay, for retail, I'm extremely disappointed in probably 90% of them. And the reason why they've lost my respect, and this was years ago, this wasn't anything regarding recently. This was years in development, because I know these guys. I played the game. I know the retail WoW content creators. I've seen them on YouTube over the years. This is nothing new. I mean, I didn't come out of the woodwork out of nowhere and be like, oh, that guy, don't like him. I mean, I've had years of experience seeing these guys on YouTube. And I've watched the game die. I literally saw so many changes to the game. The game was just an absolute shitfest, in my opinion, after Wrath of the Lich King. And it just seems like, when we needed the content creators, they just didn't play ball with us. And they kind of just defended Blizzard a little too much when Blizzard needed criticism, because Blizzard's biggest fallback, in my opinion, is the fact they don't have much competition. And I think it's up to the player base in that scenario to hold the foot to the fire and let Blizzard know, not, in a constructive way, that why this needs changing. And I just didn't see much of that while the game was dying. And it was one of the main reasons why, I continued with the channel, was because I had people coming to me saying, man, I don't know what we would do without you. And it made me realize and remember back then, I had the same problem. I was hoping that someone would, come out and say the game is going downward. And there were a few people, but even then, it's almost as if it felt like they were trying to hold back a few punches when it's sometimes okay to throw a few of them. Mm-hmm. And that's what drives me to continue doing my channel, because when shit hits the fan, I want to throw those punches. Mm-hmm. Now, how hard are those punches going to be? That comes with experience and over the timetable to see how hard those punches are thrown. I mean, back then probably would have been a lot more, mm-hmm. because, it was extremely disappointing with Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, and Warlords of Draenor, and to a degree Legion. It was just extremely disappointing.
What about on the classic side of things?
Classic side, I'm not really seeing much content, I got to be honest. I look at videos every day. I'm just not really seeing much. And the other thing, too, is I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that I think people need to be careful when it comes to content creation. I feel like, and I'm going to get a little flack for this probably, but who cares? But I'm just really tired of seeing just people. It seems like instead of taking this opportunity, and I'll leave it at this, instead of taking this opportunity to cherish and understand what the game's all about and why we love the game, and excitement for coming back to the game, I feel like a lot of the content creators in vanilla right now, I'd say probably half of them, maybe a little more, are focused more on making this a business plan and business opportunity than reliving the past opportunity.
When you say making it a business plan, do you mean focusing on their personal business through their content, or Blizzard's business plan?
I think they're using Classic to gain donations, view counts, and subscribers.
Okay.
And they don't care about the well-being of the game, and I feel like that they're going to play regardless of whatever Blizzard does.
To play devil's advocate and to be fair to the other side of the coin here, what would you say to people who might say, well, Alex, you've got a successful YouTube channel. What about any kind of revenue stream that you might generate through what you do?
Well, here's the thing. My question for that would be, if I was all about it, why did for 3 years did I make content that could have been taken down at any point?
Fair enough. Now, with the current environment, as we said, the environment of the classic content community, and you've been involved for some years now, and you've mentioned that you're not happy with some of the content and you feel it might be designed a certain way for those clickbaity, view count, revenue.
Yes, there's a lot of it right now, quite a lot.
In saying that, do you feel that your channel takes on a certain element of entertainment in terms of, do you feel like you put on a certain persona to invite people into your channel, or that's all you?
Basically my channel, what the channel is all about is just preserving the game, just preserving the game in its entirety, respecting the fact of emulation, respecting the fact that, we're trying to emulate a game we can't play currently with no changes. Mm-hmm. And, if you're asking for changes to the game, I mean, of course, I don't want that kind of person in my community. And I think that's absolutely fair game. Mm-hmm. I mean, most of my community does not want changes to the game. I mean, there's a few people that even, and it's not even a retail WoW thing. You can play retail WoW. I have no problem if you play retail WoW. But from what I've seen and my moderation team has seen and most of my subscribers have seen, is that most of the people asking for changes to the game are playing retail WoW right now and aren't playing on private servers. And that's the stigma that comes into it now. Again, I think it's fair game that somebody can comment on Classic and say no changes that is playing retail WoW. But on the other side of the coin, most of the people that want changes are playing retail WoW and they're making people look like shit. Mm-hmm. So I think that category itself is just that's how it's said.
Sure. Now, sorry, just a couple of final questions before we get to the fun stuff, but just finishing up on this angle. I know you haven't had a chance to listen to the show yet, but I'll just let you know that touching on what we've just discussed, recently I devoted a show to about an 85-minute analysis and rather full-on breakdown of a recent video of a content creator, Tips Out Baby, and I think you have mentioned this as well in one of your videos recently. And I really put his work under the microscope with a certain video that people are aware of now that he did recently. And I sort of, as I do on the show, I looked at it from both angles and really scrutinized the things that he was saying. With things like that happening, and as you say, you feel like people are doing things for clickbait purposes, what would you have to say to content creators who are taking that angle?
I would say you can do it the right way and still be successful.
Okay.
Like I don't even know what I would say really, because I don't think that's possible to change their behavior, because some of them, and again, no names, I'm thinking of a broad, I'm sure some people might be listening and they're like, oh, he's talking about this person. Not really. I'm talking at a broader angle here. There's a lot of them, not just the people are thinking about, but there's I look at videos all the time. There's a few of them, too. There's quite a few, actually. And
so you spend a lot of time watching other people's videos?
It's YouTube meta, to be honest. A lot of people, that's how you get successful on YouTube. You clickbait titles and you spread lies. That's how people usually get successful on YouTube. I mean, I don't know.
So do you get the time to watch a lot of videos, a lot of other people's content?
Yes, yeah, no. There's some kind of creators that I don't watch their content anymore, period.
Okay. And
I would go out of my way to, like, if I'm on stream or someone links a video of a certain person, I probably would just not listen to it.
Sure. And again, sort of trying to avoid that mudslinging.
And again, sorry, not to interrupt you again. It's not because that I hate the person. It's just, again, and I think people need to understand this, is the experience I've had. Like, you can say, oh, I hate this person, but do you really know this person? I do. You know, there's been people I've talked to on a daily basis. Some of these people I don't talk to anymore. And people always wonder and question, hey, Alex, why don't you collab with these people anymore? That's between me and them. There's information stuff that we've had disagreements on in private that people just don't understand. So to the public, it'll look bad. That's okay. Like, people can make their own opinions.
Sure. How does it make you feel? Does it either somewhat flatter you in a way, or does it make you get shitty or sort of piss you off when you see content creators, and I won't name names, and again, trying to avoid the mudslinging thing, but when you see certain content creators focus a video on you, whether it's your opinions or footage of your gameplay, you know, uploading videos of you actually playing the game, how does that make you feel?
Oh, that's absolute bullshit. I know some people would be fine with it, but I'm totally not. And I have no problem saying I'm not. I don't. Like, if somebody was to talk about the game and use my footage, I would be extremely pissed. I would be pissed. It would not be okay with me.
Mm. And
I would do anything in my power to probably take down the video, to be honest. It really depends. Like, if I know for a fact the person's just trying to get view counts and ad revenue off of my work, yeah, absolutely.
Right. But let's say in a situation, dividing that between situations where they do use your footage, and let's say they've got a video where they don't use your footage, but they're talking about you and devoting content to you. How does that make you feel?
Well, it depends. I mean, on my streams, I do that with other videos, but we're really doing it for educational purposes. You know, I mean, if there's like a video of someone I really don't like, I'm not going to really put it on because I just don't like the person. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, people can do what they want. I mean, but I don't think from a moral perspective, it's a good idea. I mean, there's a reason too why on my channel, like right now, I'm making videos about commentary, but I don't have World of Warcraft footage, and I could easily use other people's footage. But to me, I'm just not ready to do that yet. Not sure if I'm okay with it or not.
Sure. Now, I asked some of my listeners if anyone had any questions, and I got one question from a listener of mine named Minoru, who asked this: was there one moment in particular when you decided to go public about the game the way in which you have, or was it a gradual build-up over time?
Oh, I would never in a million years have guessed I'd be in the position I'm in right now. Or even having a community, or even talking to a Blizzard employee. I never in a million years. When I started the channel, it wasn't for ad revenue, wasn't for anything. The only thing I started the channel for was to talk about Nostalrius. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that, keep going. You might as well.
So you mentioned at the very top of the show, sorry, this is the last question, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff. You mentioned at the top of the show that you started in 2004. Is that right?
Right. Okay. December, on Christmas Day, 2004.
Okay. The only reason I ask is, and I appreciate that this might be complete and utter hearsay, but online some people seem to think that you started later than that. What would you say to that?
I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious because maybe I should just interview my mom one time and she'll let you know how much she hates World of Warcraft. Because I laugh. I mean, I have the proof. I mean, I don't have any pictures of my gameplay because from a long time ago, I mean, the chances of you having that stuff is pretty slim. Mm-hmm. I used to have all my stuff. It was on a program called Xfire. A lot of people probably, especially the PvPers, might remember. It was pretty popular with the PvP community, but I would use Xfire and I'd have all my pictures on there, but I was younger at the time, didn't really understand technology. That was at the time where I didn't even know how to build a computer. So I had no idea what I was doing, right? I had all that information on Xfire, and then Xfire shut down and I couldn't get the pictures, but I have my subscription history. I was subscribed from 2004 all the way through Burning Crusade to Wrath. Mm-hmm. I have all my memories and experiences and stories. If that's not enough for people, I don't even know what to say anymore.
Sure. All right, Alex. Well, that wraps up the interview part of things, but I let you know earlier that each episode on the show, we have a fun little segment called anger management, and I invite basically the interviewee to rant for about a good 30 to 60 seconds if there's one topic in particular that you really want to get off your chest and just go nuts about. Okay, let's get into it with a very special Alexensual anger management.
Blizzard not managing the community in the way they should be doing. I think it's Blizzard already has come out and said vanilla means vanilla, right? So I don't see the reason for allowing people to troll and this isn't just saying, oh, just ban everybody who disagrees. That's not it either. That's not it at all. What I'm saying is I think it's bullshit how you can go on the forums on Classic and you see these people making these outrageous threads asking for transmog or LFD or LFR in vanilla WoW, and they're not held accountable for trolling. I mean, the Blizzard has come out and said, Ian Hopkostas has come out and said vanilla means vanilla, and they want to make it true to how it was. So if that's the case, I mean, I don't think there's any room for any discussion about changes that weren't in vanilla WoW. I mean, I can understand discussion about changes in vanilla completely. I understand that. I think there's debate for that, I guess, with certain examples. But, you know, to say you can go on a forum and just say, oh, I want all of these changes just to troll and rile people up and make people mad, I just don't think that should be allowed. I think maybe that there should be a Blizzard forum post that says, okay, vanilla, Classic's coming, Classic is Classic, vanilla means vanilla. You know, these things, anything from post vanilla won't be in the game, and it's not up for discussion. And I think they should remove certain topics that absolutely have no reason to be in that discussion.
All right. Thanks very much for that. Now we're going to get to the final segment of the show. It's a segment I like to call the hot seat. I got about seven or eight fun questions that I want to run you through. So are you up for it?
Sure. Why not?
All right. Now, first question, ruling out when is Classic coming out and will there be changes or not? If you could ask one Classic-related question of the devs right now, what would it be?
Are we getting 1.1?
Okay. Next question. You're familiar with the game, you know, fuck, marry, kill?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to do fuck, marry, kill with Warcraft stuff. So, patch 1.1, patch 1.11, or patch 1.12. Fuck, marry, kill. Who you got?
Marry 1.1. What was the 1 point? You said 1.11?
So, patch 1.11, which is when Nax was added, but before Cross-Realm Battlegrounds.
Okay. Fuck 1.11, marry 1.1, kill 1.12.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Kill 1.12 because that's, I believe, is the patch where they introduced Cross-Realm Battlegrounds.
That's correct.
They started to dumb down the game.
Okay, all right. Now, if you were stuck on a desert island with one NPC from the game, who would it be and why?
Khadgar, so he could conjure food for me.
Fair enough. Okay, what's the meanest thing you've ever done in the game?
I ninja looted a guild bank in Burning Crusade.
Okay. Now, what class would you say you kick ass at, and what class would you say you suck at?
I would say I've been pretty good at Priest, pretty bad probably at either Druid or probably Warrior.
Okay. Do you have a proudest in-game moment?
In retail or private? Or do you want to answer for both?
Either.
Okay, for private, it was the Stowry shut down when it was announced and everybody was around each other. I thought it was a proud moment to be there with the community, so I would say that for private. Mm-hmm. For retail, killing Illidan Stormrage for the first time.
Okay. Do you have a most embarrassing in-game moment?
Yes, I talked about this last night, actually. I remember there was a moment in Karazhan. I was very much younger at the time. I was on my Blood Elf Priest. So if I don't know if people realize that I at launch of Burning Crusade, I decided to start at level 1 as a Blood Elf, and I wanted to be a Blood Elf Priest, so I leveled 1 to 70, and I ended up being in a Karazhan group in my guild, and during this time, I didn't have push to talk on, and my dad was really yelling at me for something I did, and the entire Ventrilo heard the entire thing, and it was pretty awkward and embarrassing.
Okay. Do you have...
Always have push to talk on, boys.
Yeah, definitely. Good advice. Good advice. Now, what is your guess for the release date of World of Warcraft Classic?
Middle of 2019, maybe right before summertime.
Okay. What was the moment that you fell in love with World of Warcraft?
The series originally was Warcraft 2. I that's when I fell in love with the series, the IP was Warcraft 2, and the lore and the game. But with World of Warcraft, it was probably that first time making that Orc Warrior in Durotar, just being there the very first time logging in. It was amazing.
Okay.
I felt like there was this huge world, and I just never wanted to log out.
I'm sure most people listening to this podcast feel the exact same way. Now, final question. Tell me why you, Alexensual, are most excited for World of Warcraft Classic.
It's going to revolutionize the genre. I love Classic and all. Don't get me wrong. Love Classic, love Vanilla. I'm going to play it again. But this is a bigger thing than most people realize, is that if Classic WoW is successful, it could open the door for more MMOs, more competition for Blizzard, which is always a good thing because they never had competition, ever.
Okay. Well, that wraps everything up, Alex. And I've got to say, just a really big thank you once again for coming on the show. You know, I must give credit to you. You answered some relatively tough questions there, and you weren't shy in anything. Please do plug all your stuff again. Where can people find you? Okay, they can find me on Twitter or YouTube, Alexensual, the Wolverine icon. We are, again, having a podcast starting this Friday with myself, Labos, and Marky Mark, all streamers, all playing on private servers, all currently in the same guild, all currently raiding Naxxramas on Light's Hope, and we're very excited to share our experiences and go over a lot of topics, topics that need to be discussed, and also, with some added punch with the experience. I think will be really good, and it's going to be a lot of good discussion because we all played vanilla. We all, have been playing private, and there's a lot of things to discuss that could go good or bad for Classic, and we're really excited to start that going on. Sure. Sorry, I should say this podcast is probably going up on the next Friday, the 20th of April. So is your podcast going to be a regular, as close as you can to being a regular thing? So will people be able to find you every Friday? Yeah, I don't know if it'll be every Friday, but it will be at least once a week. We're going to aim for at least once a week if we can meet at the same time, and we'll go live, and it'll be on my channel, and it'll be all swell. All right. So listeners, if you are interested in Alexensual and his content, you can find him on YouTube and obviously on the podcast that he just mentioned. Alex, thanks so much once again. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on Countdown to Classic. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to that, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. It was such a pleasure to sit down and conduct that interview, and all of the interviews that I have conducted so far, and there's many more coming, and they're all just like that, so I hope you enjoyed that. Now, I just want to get rid of a few housekeeping issues for you all. If this was your first episode of Countdown to Classic, guess what? I have heaps more available. I release episodes 3 times per week on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so please go back to the catalog, download every single episode that you haven't heard, and please do have a listen and enjoy the show. And if you do happen to enjoy the show, then please subscribe to the show wherever you got this podcast from, whether it's on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it may be. Please hook up with the show via Discord. We have a Discord channel, and I'd love to see you there because I'm on it all the time, and I love talking to fans. You can find the link in the show notes or on the website. Also, we're on all social medias, Twitter. Please throw me a follow. I'm actually running a competition through Twitter at the moment that has about 6 days left for free WoW game time. So if you do still happen to play retail and you'd be interested in a free month of game time, then hit me up and find the tweet in the show notes. The link is right there. And or I retweet it every now and again over the next 6 days, so look out for that. But follow me at Count2Classic with the number 2 on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook and also on Instagram, so add me there. And basically, everyone, just get amongst it. Thank you so much to everyone who has emailed me in the past few days. The show is absolutely blowing up, and I'm getting more and more emails from people, just a flood of contact from all of you saying, thank you so much, Josh. We love the show. Keep it coming. And I say to you all, thank you so much for taking the time to write to me, and I absolutely will keep it coming. If you keep listening, I'll keep it coming. The show can only improve from here, everyone, and I hope that this episode with the interview is a great indication of the direction in which the show is going, bringing you more and more fantastic content and insight into World of Warcraft Classic, this game that we are all so excited to play. So please do feel free to hit me up whenever on feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Just email that address and I get back to you pretty damn quickly usually if I'm not asleep with the time difference in Australia. So hit me up, say hi, write me a memory lane submission, write me an anger management submission, or just send me anything you like. I love to hear from you all. Thank you so much. I'll see you on Friday.